Hello, it is Dr. Regina, and we are talking about being connected. That's the new word. First of all, let me just kind of give a little brief introduction of how I am connected to you. There's got to be 6 degrees of separation somehow or another, but I am a Hopkins and Mayo Clinic trained board certified psychiatrist. And I will tell you, I am a psychiatrist. I may not necessarily be your psychiatrist. So if you're one of my patients and you're watching this, as we're talking about relationship optimization and connectedness, absolutely in the right place. Listen to every single thing that I say and take it as close to the gospel truth as I possibly can give you. If you're not necessarily my patient, then please take this as educational information for you to take back to your doctor, your psychiatrist, your primary provider, or specialist so that they can use the information that we're talking about to help you either further enhance your treatment plan or develop a treatment plan that's going to make a difference in your life and the lives of the people that you come in contact with every single day. So, we're talking about connectedness, and today happens to be a celebration of Harriet Tubman's birthday. One of my favorite people. I actually work with a group of folks who go through the Underground Railroad and we talk about leadership. So, I happen to be a business owner in addition to a psychiatrist, own our mental health practice. And I've learned a lot as it relates to leadership along the way over these past 7 to 10 years, depending on when you want to start counting. And as I've learned a lot, I definitely like to share in coaching for business coaching, but I also like to share as it relates to a variety of other things. So whenever I compare with things that I already like and love, I love to be able to do that. So, what do you know about Harriet Tubman? Beyond just the flashing lights and the information that you get from the movie? Well, if you stick with me, I'm going to share some very important things that you probably did not know about her life and her legacy. And up until this point, you may not have been able to apply it directly to your life, but after this session, you absolutely will be able to. Okay. So, first of all, as we're talking about connectedness, I do have a little slide presentation, and I'm going to share some snippets throughout the presentation on connectedness and how Harriet Tubman was able to rise to the level of prominence that she did, and also her ability to do the work that she did, primarily because of connectedness. Because of connectedness. So, here's a slide presentation that I'm going to go into, and this is the one that we talk about in our offices and for patients that are coming in, usually for individual treatments such as Spravato or TMS procedures where they're actually coming in the office. But sometimes we'll cover it as well if they're with us for psychotherapy and it relates to relationship. So, relationship optimization, breezing past this because these are the 6 zones of brilliance that we do cover for each and every patient that's willing to, because these are all the lifestyle medicine areas that have basically said if you can conquer these areas, you're over 90% of the way towards living a healthy, happy, brilliant life, right? Particularly one that's not only full of longevity, but also life with that longevity. And I'm just going to go back for a moment. Today, when we're talking about relationship management, they now call that, according to the Board of Lifestyle Medicine, they now call that connectedness. And there's a lot of data that looks at connectedness, how connected you are to other people. So, intro one for Harriet Tubman, and we want to add this for our clip. For Harriet Tubman, we know all of the glitz, the glamour for the most part, including some of the suffering, right? It's that pit to the palace story. She was in a general store, refused to catch a fellow person that was a slave. Apparently, got in the way either intentionally or accidentally, and had a very heavy weight thrown at her, and it hit her in the head, and it caused her to have several things. The main one was she would have these blackout periods. She was actually very ill after this. Many people know this, but what we don't often think about is the fact that it was kind of a blessing in disguise in some ways. Absolutely not being hit in the head. That was horrible. That was very bad. What I'm talking about is the fact that these spells that she would have where she would just kind of go out for a moment, in those times, those were times that she connected to her higher power. And you're going to see me talk about that in a moment. But she connected to her higher power. And usually by the time she came to, she actually had an idea about what it was that she needed to do next. Her purpose in life, She got through dreams and visions, just like Joseph from the Bible. Now, when she would come to from these events or episodes when she was a little child, she didn't immediately have what we think about and saying, "Okay, you've got this vision. Let's have these smarter goals." And we go through these in more in depth and detail in some of the earlier talks. If you look at the healthful intake one, I went through it really well. But she did have a lot of these elements that helped her with success. She did have a vision. She did have these visions that she had when she was asleep, and she did have a goal, and she was quite intentional about it, and it was very achievable for her and obviously relevant to the things that were of interest to her. Now, what you didn't know or might not have known is that from a self-care perspective, when we think about connectedness and being connected, the first person that you might want to be connected with is yourself. The greatest commandment, Jesus was asked about the two greatest commandments. The first one, he says, well, love the Lord your God with all your strength, all your mind, all your soul. And then he said, and the second is like unto this, love your neighbor as yourself. But it's kind of hard to love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. So here's just a very basic rubric, because I love the fact that the Bible will usually tell us what to do, it doesn't always tell us how to do it. And I think that relates back to connectedness. Why? Because we usually need each other in a mentor mentee relationship, in a peer to peer relationship, in a pastoral or a flock relationship. We need relationships to help us usually get from where we are to where we want to be. The first and primary relationship is that relationship with yourself. So sometimes it's connecting that past self to the present to the future. We do a lot of work on talking about the inner child and feeding the inner child. I see that all the time, and that's very popular. And of course, we want to be connected to our current self, the mindfulness, being in the moment. And then I see a lot as it relates to the future self, vision boards. Where do you envision yourself years and years from now? But what do we do to connect all of those different spectrums? Are you doing something to connect all of those things? Harriet Tubman, literally every single time that she went from the north back to the south to do something, was connecting those things. She literally was physically going back to her past every time she went back south. She was also connecting with her current self, being very mindful of what was going on at that time, whether it was after the time that the Fugitive Slave Act was passed. And it basically said, hey, if you are a free slave and you run away and you've managed to escape, guess what? Someone could come and capture you and bring you back. That was a very difficult time for slaves and even people who were abolitionists and who were helping with slaves. It was a very difficult time for them to be able to maneuver from one place to the next. So again, I love that William Shakespeare quote, first above all, to thine own self be true. She had to be very with it as it related to what was going on in the present times, but not allow those things to necessarily deter her, only to educate her on how to be maybe more on guard or where to go and where not to go. But always having that very um, tenacious focus in relationship to, okay, who am I today and what am I going to do? And then for the future self, being able to maybe envision where she wanted to go, but being very quick to shift and change if that didn't come out to reality. For example, did you know that when Harriet Tubman went back for the purpose of getting her husband, she realized that he had remarried and had no intention of going back with her? And initially, she was quite angry and said that she even wanted to hurt him herself for, in her mind, basically like shattering the dream and the vision that she had of coming back and being with her husband and then being a happy family up north. But she was able to shift her perspective a bit because there were other people that were slaves that said, hey, we heard you were here and we want to go back with you. So even though her husband didn't want to be free and didn't care that much about that dream, there were plenty of other people that were willing to adopt her dream, who were willing to come alongside her and help her continue to manifest that wonderful version of her future self that we've learned so much about, movies, books, all kinds of things. Spending time with yourself for self-reflection, that is a part of loving yourself. And affirmations are a great way to do that. I'm sure you've heard of all kinds of wonderful affirmations. If you don't have a series that you can look to, please, absolutely. You can always go online and listen to a couple of them. And if you happen to be connected to us, we usually will give our patients a set of affirmations that they can read every single day as a combination of scriptures and positive phrases, but loving affirmations. Spending time with yourself for personal development, books and podcasts for personal development, but also for professional development. And then rewarding yourself. Of course, you can reward yourself with words of affirmation. You know what? You did a good job today. I'm proud of you. My journal that I have every single day, it asks me, what was your win? You know, and just going over my win rewards myself. When we eat dinner, we usually will say, what's your high and what's your low? The low is usually something that we're reflecting on, maybe didn't go so well, but the high is something that we all get to celebrate ourselves first, but then those that are with us. And then acts of random kindness. You can reward yourself with the act of random kindness by maybe eating a little bit healthier, making a wiser choice for yourself, or reward another person with that act of random kindness. Spiritual relationships. Remember, I said for Harriet Tubman, during those times where she would have the spells, but she would just kind of fall off asleep and then pop awake again, those were usually times that she felt that she had been with the Lord. She got new direction, she got fresh perspective. That was one of the ways that she stayed plugged into her higher power. But another way are the ways that you see on the screen: meditation, going off and kind of being by herself at times, prayer, mindfulness. These aren't things that Harriet Tubman did on her own. These were also things that, I love. The best person that I can think of for sacred self care was Christ, was Jesus Christ. I mean, there were people that were constantly clamoring for him, but it says early in the morning he got up and went out and I spent time with his father. Early in the morning he went spent time with his father. He always made time for prayer and meditation and mindfulness, just kind of being present in the moment. There were the disciples. I love the Chosen series where it's like, oh, we're finally going to make it big. We're finally going to go out and do the things and people are going to be known. And he was like, I'm just trying to be here in this village with this group of people, and just talk to them. It's like, hey, let's go out and talk to these adults or talk to these powerful people about what's going to happen. And he says, no, 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 no. Except for the little children who are right here that are trying to talk to me, not the clamoring uh, sycophants over there. Let's just worry about or be concerned about the people that are right here in this moment. That's a way to stay plugged into your higher power and enhance your spiritual relationship. The deeper sense of belonging to something greater than you. This was huge for Harriet Tubman. Huge upon huge upon huge. Because during that time that she went back to get her husband, that was basically around one of the times where initially she was only going back for family, you know, my four and no more, you know. I want to go back and get my siblings. I want to go back and get my mother and father. I want to go back and get my husband. That's it. That's all she was planning to do. But when her husband didn't want to go with her, it shifted some things. You have to think about the fact that there are some times in your life that you're expecting one thing and your goal is one thing, and you are going to fall short of your goal. And your dream literally may be completely pulverized, as it was with Harriet Tubman in wanting her husband to go back with her to freedom. And she sat there and was wondering, what am I going to do? And that's when these other slaves just kind of came up to her and said, will you take us back? And the light bulb went off. And she said, you know what? It has to be more than just me and mine. I have to have a sense that I'm here for a purpose that's greater than just me. Okay. So there may be what you see on the slide here: feeling of unity, a sense of being at a spiritual height, experiencing something sacred and holy, the awareness of life or living presence in all things, a sense of awe or awesomeness. All of those things may happen. None of those things may happen, but you still may have this deep sense or have a very obvious and tangible uh, awareness because you've got 5 or 6 slaves around you who are saying, I want to go back. And we're willing to do whatever. And she said she made up in her mind that day. Number one, she wasn't going to try to take anybody else back that didn't want to go. Now, once you started the journey, you were going to put your hand to the plow and keep going. Okay, that was just a non issue. However, she wasn't going to come and get people and drag them out with her. That wasn't going to happen. If you wanted to go, yes, you can go. But that was the second thing she decided. Only taking the people that really wanted to go, that were that had made up in their minds that they were going for it and not turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I'm going forward and I'm not going back. Okay. That was really important for her. And then the last part of intimacy that we'll talk about is the intimacy, the relationship with others, and allowing them to have an intimate role with you, allowing you to share with them and then have that reciprocate, having them be able to access some of your inner thoughts and giving them some access. This is a acrostic over here on the side, and you can see access to your true thoughts and feelings, access through conflict and commitment intimacy, communication and creative intimacy. These are different types of intimacy. Emotional, experiential intimacy, sexual and physical intimacy. That's the one we usually think about, but it's, as you see, it's a minority on the screen. Spiritual and supportive intimacy. These are all different types of intimacies that we can have that have nothing to do with the physical, all except one, right? Have nothing to do with what we hear um, reported about and blasted about all the time. The ability to go to a music museum or go out in nature and see a fellow hiker, and you're both looking at the same beautiful thing, the same beautiful piece of artwork, or the same beautiful piece of nature, or area of nature. You don't even have to speak, but you're just kind of like silently communing together and appreciating what you see. That's intimacy. Allowing somebody to share in a moment with you and see how much what you're seeing together is resonating with you and you're seeing what's resonating with them. That's a level of intimacy that I don't think we think about very often. Now, Harriet would not be the Harriet Tubman that we know of right now if it wasn't for her ability to relate with others. And I don't mean just taking people back and forth. Obviously, that was very important. But it wasn't until Harriet got up north and was asked and invited to be a part of the Underground Railroad. She eventually ended up spearheading many missions, obviously going back and then teaching and training others as well. But it wasn't until there was the invitation for her to join others in a movement that was already occurring that she knew nothing about. On her first trip up, she didn't necessarily know that she was participating in the Underground Railroad. It wasn't until she got up north that the invitation was given to her, and I love that. I love the fact that we have this community that was created around something that she was already doing and doing very well on her own, but it multiplied once she did it in concert with the other abolitionists, the Quakers, other people that were a part of the Underground Railroad, and then it blossomed into what we know today. The last point that I want to make that I bet you have no idea about Harriet Tubman is that she died for the most part in obscurity. Think about it. After the rush of the Underground Railroad and then the transition into the civil rights movement, and then after that, the the shift into knowing more about what happened after the Civil War, you know, her being a strategist, a nurse, all of these other things. What do you know about Harriet Tubman? Most people don't know anything. They don't know anything unless they've continued to read about her life or read a biography or gone on a tour. I actually learned so much on the tour that we co-led. Right, there were three of us that co-led this tour on the Underground Railroad leadership in the battlefield out in and along Cambridge, Maryland. And after having spent the day literally walking in the footsteps that she walked, at the end of that tour, it was a wonderful time, but I also wanted to know so much more about her. And that's when I did that additional research and started looking at pictures. And I said, "Ooh, there's a picture of her very older and wizened and all white, surrounded by family." And then I saw her in a cottage with a daughter and her new husband that she married. And I was like, where did all these things come from? Well, let me fill you in on some gaps that you might not have known. First of all, after the Civil War, Harriet actually went back up to the North, created the equivalent of a boarding house for people that were going and coming and needed a place to stay. One of her boarders eventually became her husband. She had no biological children, but she did adopt a young lady. And that young lady, the daughter that she adopted, she was one of the pivotal people that continued to share Harriet's story and make sure that those of us who are living now were aware of her legacy. However, there's a quiet, quiescent period. And then again, there's a drop off again. And not as much is known at that time. But what we do know is that there was a period of time that Harriet really didn't want to talk about all of the things that she had done when she was younger. She wanted to live a quiet, peaceful life, didn't want to ride on the notoriety of all the exploits that she'd had before. She wasn't crying out for fame or fortune. She led a life of, I don't want to say poverty, but just a very modest living, and didn't really want to just be exploitative. That's the best way that I can put it. She didn't want to exploit herself. She knew enough about herself, took enough care about herself that she wanted to make sure that she was in good space. From a spiritual perspective, don't know as much about that, but I'm going to guess from her time that she spent with the Lord, it would not be out of the realm of possibility that these were quiet, peaceful times that she had more time to spend from a spiritual perspective. And we 100% know from the work with others, she loved her family, spent a lot of time with her family, and it was her exploits were so little known, and she really was just Aunt Harriet, Cousin Harriet, to the point that, to be honest with you, I was reading about some of her relatives that are alive now, or have been, alive just within the last few decades, where some of them said that when they were in school and they were learning about her, and people were learning about her, first of all, some of them didn't even know that she was their cousin. That's how quiet things were kept at that time. And then others would tell people, yeah, that's my cousin Harriet. And when one young man said he stopped sharing it because he got laughed at, because people were like, there's no way she's your cousin. So I just want you to think about that, just food for thought. We usually do spend a lot of time clamoring for praise, clamoring for notoriety, clamoring to know and be known. But Harriet Tubman, one of the bravest uh, pioneers of the anti slave movement that I can think of, author, speaker, abolitionist, military strategist, nurse, literally did all the things. And in her later years, was known for none of that. She was mainly known for her role in staying connected to her God, staying connected and true to herself, and staying connected and true to her family, to the point that that's all her family knew. Many of her family knew for a very long time. She was just Aunt Harriet. She was just Cousin Harriet. So, just food for thought. I hope this was helpful for you. And if this has been helpful, and if you've got questions or comments, please put them in the comment section below. For those of you who are on YouTube, if you will like and subscribe and share, that's the way that the algorithm knows that this is information that you think is helpful. And especially because today is Harriet Tubman Day, I would love for you to be able to share this, because I thought these were some great insights about her that I never knew. Never knew. It wasn't taught to me in school. And I did a leadership talk, and some of the things that I learned even on the talk were things that I had never known before. So if there was something that resonated with you, appreciate you marking it, tagging it, and sharing it. Okay. You guys have a very blessed day on purpose. Take care.